Fantastic. So this was a interesting preparation. We had a chat with Caroline on Friday, and she's just really busy, snowed under, everything like that. She didn't see herself making it. Fortunately, she has made it, but that means that we'll talk mainly data modeling and the data management side of data privacy. But if you do have any questions or any discussions that need to be addressed from a papaya or a GDPR point of view, she's here to help, and she'll certainly be able to answer that. Okay. All right, let's get going. Now, just to share with you that I've had quite a bit of help from both Zelda and Connie, and I certainly may defer to them every now and again to just confirm that our interpretation is correct. So it was quite a nice talk, preparing it with the three of us. We missed Jürgen. I'm still trying to get him to get going on that. Okay, so just wanted to review from last week. I did mention in terms of OneTrust, what people are suggesting. We don't have long to go from a papaya point of view, and some of those that are even within the GDPR environment and haven't started, they need to get going. Sorry, I've got feedback. Mohammed? Okay. So even if you need to get going, we've got to start somewhere. Now, the order of execution is what I would suggest. First of all, we get the policy management done. And I'm not saying all the policies, but policies around the ROPA and the data mapping, those type of areas, it's good to get that defined first before we start rolling out and start executing on the ROPA, and the ROPA, for those that don't understand or don't know, it's the Registry of Processing Activity. That is predominantly a GDPR term, but I know that it is certainly addressed within Papaya, either in terms of the impact assessment, the privacy impact assessment, and or the data flow. So it's not as if it's not there, it just hasn't been given the title of ROPA or Registry of Processing Activities. I do like it. And I even found with some of our customers, they're saying, what about the ROPA? And it's like, okay, I didn't know that was specifically for Papaya, but it's certainly relevant. And once you've got through ROPA, you've got to keep on going. And I was talking to Connie this afternoon and just saying, please don't stop at the end of your processing activity design. That's not the end. The end is getting the right data discovery done, getting the lineage, getting all these data catalogs built. That's, I believe, where we start seeing a lot of value from a data management point of view. But it's getting that first step going so you have an understanding of where you are. All right, so I broke it down just in terms of order of implementation priority. And see, here are some of the prerequisites in terms of the policy management. I always find that we start with all these policies and we get 20, 30, 40, 50 documents, and all of a sudden we can't find what's where. So having a policy management system is really helpful to be able to explain relationships and issues like that. Vendor management in terms of different people that may be processing on our behalf. So that's important to have, what agreements we have in place, consent and preferences in terms of, do we have any formalized consent, where is it, and the other issue that we talk about is data ethics. All right, so when we look at the priority, the implementation priority, yes, we need to get the policy going. We need to start dealing with stuff like ownership and catalog and lineage and processing activities. But the important thing, what I'm suggesting is to get going with the data mapping, being the ROPA, the discovery, and the inventory, and then moving on to privacy by design. So I put this together, and basically what I'm saying is I see the first phase as the ROPA. What processing are we doing? And when we understand and when we've done this job properly, we can then relate to what Caroline has presented to us. I'm sure we shared this with you, penalties and fines. We spoke about it quite often. These are all the different risk time and the risk weights and things like that. So once we've done the processing, we can get to the riskiest risks. And after that, we can go on to the second phase. For today, we're going to be focusing on the first phase, but I just want to make it clear that it doesn't end there. So we don't tick the box at the end of ROPA and say we're done. It's just a great place to start and at least to demonstrate that you are progressing. Now, one of the things that I found with going through sample spreadsheets and stuff like that is the weakest link in these ROPAs and things like that is the metadata and reference data. So I'll just share with you an example of a ROPA, and I certainly wouldn't want to share any of the customers' documents. So this is an example. It comes from, there's a publication that we got. It's from the UK Information Commission. They've got a tremendous amount of materials and things like that if you want to go and have a look. And this is the Excel document. Now it may, and it's quite large, and it tries to deal with just about everything you've got, from automated decision making, legal basis of processing, legitimate interest, legal basis for processing sensitive personal retention period of personal data. So what are your retention schedules? Now, this is really nice, and it really gives you a view of what you need to do. But one of the things that I find really dangerous about these spreadsheets, especially if you're going to send them out to all your departments. So the idea is that we put together something like this, it gets sent to the departments, and they fill these issues out. Now, when you can see the examples, and this is where the problem starts coming in, the examples may be how they of limited help. Okay, so what are the departments? Information rights. Okay, I'm not sure how I can relate to that, but anyway, this is problematic in terms of giving the proper set of examples for the industries. And just in discussion with Zelda and with Connie, they said one of the biggest problems they're facing is when they present these spreadsheets and that to the business actually don't know what to fill in. And if they fill it in incorrectly, then your calculation of the risks pretty much goes out the door. Paul, I see your hands up.
Sorry, Howard, I don't know if it's just me, but I can't see a screen share or a camera. Is it just me? I think so. Okay, I see Debbie's answered me. So I apologize for interrupting you. I'm going to reconnect or something.
Okay, well, thank you. Maybe it's... Okay, great. So what I've done is I've built, and I built this once before in terms of looking at, Caroline put together a mind map, and using the mind map, I built a lot of the reference data. And here's some examples of, basically in Excel, you can put together the tables. So you can see here, this is for a system. And then when I have the system question in this guy over here, for example, what system it is, then I can really limit the choices by just saying it's a list, and the Excel formula is indirect system. Okay, so what it does mean is that I can control all of the inputs provided that are possible to the people to fill out. Okay, so we want to do away with the others. We want to do away with a lot of that stuff so that when we come to an end, at least, and we've imported all of these processing activities, we can then run the check or some form of validation according to the rules that Caroline has presented, and we can calculate what those riskiest risks are. And the important thing for that is that those riskiest risks give us a priority of looking and dealing with the data discovery and the inventory. Okay. Now, you may be able to go and do everything, but not a lot of people are there. So we have to have a way of cutting down the work that we do. Okay. So how do we resolve this issue? We basically have to ensure that all the inputs are controlled by reference data lists. I've built one in the database, and I basically refer to this as a multifaceted taxonomy for reference data. And the nice thing about that, as soon as we get these taxonomies and structures like that, we can now start to control them with stuff like an ontology and different taxonomy structures. We can use Protégé. And this is an example of a tool that I use to manage my reference data. And just to share with you, I think, let me just get that tool back. This is the tool over here. Sorry, it's not gonna, I'm not gonna be able to increase it. That's on the PowerPoint. But you can see here are my reference data items. I've grouped in total of 8 different domains of reference data. Here's one for processing type. That's account number, sent to third party, trans-border flows. And I know that if I get the data in this format, it then becomes a whole lot easier for me to map to this document that we've got in terms of calculating the risk weight that helps me decide where to go. All right. I just need to make sure that I can see you guys. There don't seem to be any questions at this point in time. So let's keep going. So to fix the problem, make sure you've got a database of all your reference data. Make sure they're in Excel. If you're going to use Excel, if you're using SharePoint, then you can control it. But you have to control the cleanliness of the input. Otherwise, you're going to get some really interesting work that you're going to, results and answers. And what we are finding is that there's lots of complications to answering these processing activities, this register. So please don't expect that you can put it together, send it out to your business people, and they're going to be able to answer. We've got certain things like, and I know, Caroline, we were actually just talking about that earlier on, where people can almost do a copy and paste of data from one system to another, and it could be deemed as sharing of data. And those systems may be local or they may be external to the customer. So that creates some complexities that the business people need to understand. So I do find it helpful. I know when we brought about a system classification or a data classification around systems, we basically had to sit with the business people and explain what we were asking and how to answer it and things like that. It's not a scenario of you can just send these things off and expect to get the proper results. Okay. All right. So what is ROPA? What is ROPA? And I just want to give you some examples. I'm sure that when you see things like a data flow chart, data mapping, data lineage, data inventory, processing operation index, these are all synonyms for the registry of processing activities, or here they call it record. I understood it to be a registry, but a similar type of thing, processing registry. And this is what it looks like. So if you go to the UK Information Office, you'll see it there, ICO, and you can see they've actually started to circle all of the inputs that are required. And the thing I like about it, from a ROPA point of view, is at this stage there is no reference to data assets. So it's not like, oh, you got to tell me the table that the customers are kept in, or you got to tell me the Excel spreadsheet that keeps us. It's just about the processing and the type of data that they're processing. So that means it should be able to go a lot quicker, and you don't have to have your data estate discovered. So you will notice in this spreadsheet where they've got a record as a controller and a record as a processor, and there's different submissions that need to come about. Okay, so this was a really nice slide that Zelda put together in terms of where does the information come from. So what we are focusing on, and just to make more sense out of this is our data processing landscape. And that could be made up of business process diagrams, IT documents, output from automated tools, SMEs that understand it, privacy assessments, internal staff, and different third parties. So we do this understanding of the processing landscape. We identify the data activities. We identify the key ROPA input information, and we get into a process of classifying this information. Now you'll see in the spreadsheet that I've got, and I'm happy to share that with you guys, is it's all the departments and the appropriate processes for Modelware have been defined there. Now, that's the sort of effort that you're going to need to go to for your own business. You can't just send them a blank page with any sort of business process. You want to be able to sit with them and get those elements defined before they start filling them out. Okay, so here's basically an example. I have shared that, I've shown you that Excel spreadsheet. You can see there examples of the types of individuals, and we know them as data subjects. So you can see there's employees and consultants, potential employees and consultants, former employees and consultants, and complainants. So the examples of this is very much based on an HR area and people that are focused on employees and complaints coming out of that. So HR area. And then we've got types of personal data, we've got sources of personal data, and these are all the different data elements that you're collecting. Now, I went through all of those different data elements, and the nice thing about it is that we can sort of work our way through that in helping us calculate the riskiest risks according to that risk weighting. Now, I have spoken about that before, so I'm not going to go into the detail of that algorithm. If you'd like more detail, I'm happy to share. What I wanted to focus on was the data privacy first phase conceptual data model. All right, so a conceptual data model is a very high level of concepts, of almost data concepts that are appropriate to that domain. And I like this diagram in terms of the simplicity of it. I think the very first time someone asked me to help them look at data privacy, I had to quickly start Googling around and finding out what it was all about. And this was one of the first elements that I came up with. And this is what people refer to as a base vocabulary. And what I always like doing with my conceptual models is starting to add color. Okay, so you'll see how it works with how this color starts to work as we progress from our conceptual data model to the logical data model and then to the different physical models. Okay, so these are the different colors. Now, one of the concepts that was missing here is the risk on the data, the risk of the data and the risk of the processing. So that's not included in here. And what I have been working on is basically a risk register. And when we calculate those riskiest risks, we have to go and add this information to a risk register so that we can start processing all of our risks. All right. Okay, so just some examples. And the thing that I loved about looking at these examples is this almost demonstrates to the number or the possible options for every single field, for every single drop down, and we understand that and we know that to be the reference data. Okay, so examples of purpose: employee administration, employee management, ethics and compliance, supplier screening, travel administration, and IT administration. Now, I know in a few of the customers, what they like to do is they like to start off with almost those business departments that are key part of the value chain, and then they'll go to the supporting departments after that. And the benefit of that is that if there's anything that they are processing and that the legislator or the authority does not like, there's the biggest impact there. If we have a problem with some of our supporting departments, we can probably find a way around it. But if there's a problem with one of our departments that's in the key business value chain and they say to us, we can't do that, that's a big disruption to the business. Okay, so start with your core departments that are part of your business value chain and then move to your supporting departments. Is everyone comfortable with that? That's almost a mapping to your business architecture. Do people understand that? Is there anyone who doesn't understand the difference between the core value chain and the supporting departments? Everyone's comfortable. Even Johan is not asking questions. Great. Okay, so that's a description of purpose. Now I've got personal data, and all I'm trying to do here is, guys, can you see how much reference data and how much typing we need to do across all of these drop-downs? Okay. Now, again, what I keep on saying is that the spreadsheet that you get, that you get from different people that are providing help, they do not have all of these lists available, and they haven't applied it to you as a company. So you can get these lists and try to do it, and the business people are going to look at you and say, I'm not sure what you're talking about, and it's going to be a bit of a mess. So I don't know if there's anything you wanted to share. I know you mentioned this, that in your first attempt, there was a bit of a disaster with.
Yeah, and I think it's the big thing about, well, one of the things is that they say is it's very valuable with these assessments is if you actually like speak to the people who are doing the processing of data, more the operational staff. The one thing is so that you can identify your shadow IT. There's a lot of things I think that IT people and business analysts and process analysts, we think we know it all, but it's not always the case.
Right.
So it's a thing of identifying that. But if those assessments aren't in a way that is easy for them to understand, then they also won't really be giving you any useful information. And I think for me also, the one thing that I've realized is one should also leave a little bit of room. There should be a balance. There should be a little bit of room that they can tell you about the things that we don't know about, so that you kind of need to go into your business with nothing. And it's not just one person. It's a lot of people that needs to be involved, managers and everything, and training people. And what we found, our team, for example, is we actually did the assessment together instead of each one individually, and which worked well because then you start thinking about stuff, and it was actually surprising how much we came up with together.
Right.
Instead of each doing it alone.
Okay. All right. Loretta, I will share the Lorata. I will share the document as soon as I get some time to focus. So the Excel's coming soon. All right. So then we have personal data description. I think I shared that with you. We've got categories of recipients. What does a recipient mean? And so it's really helpful just to have these examples so that you know what to manage and what to complete. Then we've got the technical and organizational measures. That was in purple that you may remember on the last one, and they're typically security techniques and that you're applying to encrypt and look after your personal data. Okay. All right. So this is a logical data model that we now got from the conceptual data model. It's actually pretty simple in the reference. The one area that Connie pointed out was that not all data processing needs to have consent. Caroline, if you correct me if I'm wrong, if you can say that there's a legitimate interest and that, so you probably a lot of people start with a legitimate interest, and when they don't have that or it's debatable, they would go to consent.
So there are specific instances in POPI where you have to have consent.
Yes.
But they're very, very specific. And so like in direct marketing, for example, especially to non-customers, but also to customers to some degree. But when it comes to generally to justification, consent should literally be your last choice. That's your literally your last choice. So you must have a legal basis or a contractual basis.
Right.
Or protecting protecting the interests of a third party or yourself or the data subject are much easier to keep up. Consent can be taken away at any time.
Correct. Johan, I see your hands up. Thanks, Caroline.
Yes, hi Howard. Yes, actually, the meeting wouldn't be a meeting if I didn't ask a question.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Just a quick. Actually, I may be a little bit slow, but when we got to the logical model, this is just in relation to the conceptual and the logical
Yes.
model. Would this, doing this, would a something like a dependency matrix, would this work well in this type of thing? To with your flow, actually having a like a two-dimensional dependency matrix, or is that not really
So
in this?
what I focused on is really just being able to bring the ROPA data in. Okay. Because once I've got the ROPA data in and I've got all the different permutations, right? And I've also got basically this is my Power BI model where I've been able to bring all of that data in. Hopefully you can see that. So this is basically, yes, I've now, the departments have filled it in, but I've then got to bring it into Power BI to be able to do some of the analysis and the calculations on the risk. Okay, so our focus is there at the moment. When I suppose if I'm understanding your question correctly, when one looks at a data flow diagram and almost the lineage that the data follows, you can then start picking up dependencies and also start picking up, well, the purpose that I brought the data in compared to the purpose that I shared with a internal or external that has changed, and therefore I have a problem of I'm violating some of the areas. Is that the question that you asked?
Yes, yes, I think that's where I'm going.
Yeah. And I think we were in agreement the last time we spoke is that as it goes down the chain and you don't have the purpose flowing, that's where it gets more and more complicated to discern it, and you need this linkage that's going across all of the different elements. Now, again, this focus for today is just about let's get the processing understood, and then we start using the riskiest risk to focus our attention on the areas that we need to go down into the data flow.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So then from here, I've again used the color labeling in terms of trying to understand what are those concepts are applied and how they come down. I always like that when in the data modeling tool is to use that color so that you know which area these things are coming from. Okay, so there, for example, you got your protection measures. These are the three different areas. You got the processing, and then attached to that is the purpose, and then it's a 0 to 1 in terms of that relationship of do I have consent? They had a 1, meaning that for every single data processing purpose related, I had to have consent, which we know is not the case. All right, so that's what the dimensional model looks like. So now that I've got all those reference data elements, I've got those things, I can then put together pretty much a Power BI stuff that takes all of these Excel documents together, brings them up, and then we can do the calculations on coming to the riskiest risks. And of course, we can then go and store that in the database so that you can have a register within the database. Okay, so I've taken you through those models. Now, in doing this, I've realized that probably the biggest challenge that we are facing is getting these reference data domains right. The typing that's going there. And there's so much of it. If we look at some of these areas, I just did a relationship. These are the high-level domains that have come from the concept model, and I've sort of just overlaid the different domains onto those types that we've got. Now, I think there was 166 elements that I stopped counting at. And this is something that you need to manage, and you probably go more in terms of your own reference data elements. So think about it now. If you're going to go with this thing and you want to really control all of that, you're going to have a system that manages that data. Okay, and this is an example that I showed you earlier on of the different processing. I grouped them into those 8 areas, and processing type is broken down into those elements, and they can even go down another level or 2. So it's a really nice view of a multifaceted taxonomy that we're starting to develop. Okay, so now the question comes is we got all this reference data and we need to manage it, and we need to manage the relationships between these different taxonomies. And so we had Connie, I know, raised this with Caroline to say, would a ontology / taxonomy, multifaceted taxonomy help us? I certainly believe that it will. This is a diagram that we will do in one of the presentations on data architecture, where we talk about a data-centric architecture. I was sharing a little bit earlier with Caroline the data-centric architecture and also the microservices and the canonical data model. So a lot of that's now being changed. And it's all dependent on this understanding of our taxonomy and ontology. So just to share with you this element over here, this is David McComb, and that was his book on the side there. He has the idea of a core ontology, and he's very adamant that that core ontology must be at its simplest form. Do not complicate that core ontology, because then it gets harder and harder to maintain and your system starts to creak. So he's really saying you got to keep this down to the sort of 300 mark. And I always love some of the presentations he gives where I think it was the CEO of SAP was raving about the fact that they had something like 30,000 entities. And his question was, how do you manage all of this stuff? Surely each time you add more entities, you create more problems. So what he does suggest is there's the core ontology, and then by domain, we extend that core ontology. Okay, so hopefully you see where I'm going with this, and what we're trying to share here is we can now use that conceptual model that we provided and start to extend it by industry, okay? So here's an example of how we would extend it for healthcare, okay? So now we see that the patient, that healthcare understand, that's your data subject. That is also, to an extent, your customer, may not always be your customer. For example, if from a paying point of view, then we have personal data. There's your patient record, the recipient. That's the example of a recipient would be the hospital, data processing sent by email, and the purpose is continued healthcare, that we are able to look at manage their health. All right, so now you'll see there that this is an inheritance representation or a subtyping representation. I'm not sure if you guys are comfortable with that. Johanna, I see your hand is still up. Have you got another question, or we just left it from behind?
I'm actually sorry, Howard. I've got it. I was actually typing the question because I don't want to interrupt you.
Okay.
Actually, we can discuss this actually afterwards. It was actually something also maybe for Caroline as well. So I don't want to interrupt the flow now. I'll ask it afterwards.
Okay.
Thanks.
So if it's a question about ontologies and taxonomies, happy to deal with it now. Otherwise, we can defer it till we're finished. Okay. So this is how these ontologies work. Nice to read this book from David McComb on data-centric revolution. And this is a very different approach to a microservice approach. A microservice approach focuses on containing everything to do with a domain, typically a business domain. So for example, billing would have its domain, it has its own databases, it has its own team, it has its own everything. Even DevOps, support, everything. So I have put a presentation together, so if people would like to see that, we can schedule something like that. But the important thing here is our ability to extend that core ontology. And it's almost by industry, so we can help people fill out the forms correctly. I added this extra slide in here for two reasons. There's two ways to extend an ontology. The one way that we've shown just before that is a new class. And then we have another way, which is an instance. Okay. Now, that instance relates very much, as an example, to the reference data, where a class will more than likely have its own attributes. Okay, so if you've done any object-oriented development, you'll quickly realize that if it's really just a set of possible options, then I'll use an enum or an element like that, and there's no reason to specialize behavior. But if you have your own properties and elements like that, or your own set of functionality, you would go to a new class and extend it like that. Okay, now this is the way it would look like in Protégé. I'm sure you've heard us talk about that quite often, where you can then extend the data subject as to a healthcare provider, a healthcare professional, and a healthcare patient. Okay, so those are extra class instances of the data subject. And you can see that that's a different approach to that of what I'm doing here, which is the data subject type, which is in column M, and these are just different reference data items. Now, please remember that the Excel spreadsheet that what we're doing here, reference data, is to help people populate the ROPA. Okay, it's not to build an entire ontology or taxonomy. So what I am trying to just share with you guys is that requirement in terms of being able to ensure the data is correct and we're getting the right information. So here, what we do believe is important. As an example, if you have a data subject, these are the different types of derivatives that you can do by industry. For example, healthcare, these are the set of possible elements on data subject. That may be recipient and things like that. We've also got procurement, insurance industry, product and service, government and non-profit. That would be a stakeholder. That always catches you in terms of non-profit. They don't have customers, but they do have people that are interested in the outcomes or stakeholders. All right, and then another extension that we have over here would be data processing. Is it a copy and paste? Is it copy and paste via paper, sharing via screen sharing, print, somebody reading something left on the printer, copy and paste, pushing to a third party, or share via email? So this is where you'll need to sit with your department and actually work through what the possible options are. Okay, so that's the summary of basically the data model for the ROPA. And there's a whole lot of reference material that we've provided. But are there any questions or any comments? Connie, would you like to make a comment on any of these things?
No, good. Happy to answer any questions though.
Okay. Any comments or questions from anybody else?
So Johan had a question.
Okay.
So he was asking, could we ring fence personal data and then work from there with processes, etc. Work out from, so ring fence your data and then work outwards. And so I remember that you had this, you mentioned this before in the previous meetup, Howard. What was your feedback on that? Yeah,
so we certainly can. What I did, Johan, was I ran an analyzer within the database and almost classified the attributes. And then I could say, oh, right, so I've only got 4 attributes in my entire database that relate to personal data. And then I only need to worry about systems or elements that refer to those tables. So that can also ring fence it. The only problem you have with that is that if you've got 100 databases or whatever it is, you've now got to get some level of automation to pick it up. Okay.
Actually, just a question on that, or a comment on that, Howard. Would you then, from that also, what you explained, would you then also be able to determine the fair amount of risk? Actually, would you be able to?
No, that was
some risk scorecards or not?
That was the penny that dropped for me, because I had been doing a lot of this work in terms of collecting all the metadata, the data dictionary, data assets, and handing it over to lawyers. So I've been involved in 3 different engagements where people called me in to almost do a discovery process and then hand the data over to the lawyers. And I could never really understand how they were going to complete the process until Caroline showed me that that processing risk element. Now, if we go and look at the processing risk element, let's go there quickly. Sure, I hope I can find, there we go. Okay, so if you look at the processing risk element, Johan, you will notice that a lot of it is about what processing are we doing, okay? It's account numbers are sent to third parties. Now, the data dictionary can't help you there. The data dictionary can certainly tell you I've got these account numbers, but they can't tell you that I've been sent, this data has been sent to a third party. Similar to child PI with trans-border flow, it's all about the processing of it. Almost, if you think of a data flow diagram, the one level is at a system level and you do the data at the different systems, but then when you bring in the applications and the procedures and the business processes, that's when you start to understand what it is that we're talking about.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So
there's a question from Mark. Can we zoom in on the reference material URLs?
Yeah, we got that. I'm
Okay.
happy.
Right.
It's a surprise, Howard. I would comment. This is a significant piece of work. Something like this would take months to do in an organization.
Yes. So this is and it was really sobering to talk to people like OneTrust that have been doing it with organizations across the world.
Mm.
When you've got 2-3 months to go, you really don't have the options and the niceties of getting to all of this fancy stuff like a catalog and a lineage and all this sort of stuff. You can't even get past the processing activity.
Right. Yeah.
You're going to be lucky just to get that done. I can't get to all of these other elements and the things of possible enrichment and ethics and compliance. We can't even get there. So we for those that haven't been doing it and need to get there, this is your I wouldn't say get out of jail, because I don't believe you're out of jail, but I do believe that you've made a good start. Caroline, I don't know if you would like to comment on that.
Yeah, I think, if you're taking a risk-based approach is definitely the way to go. But yeah, it is a continual improvement program. It's not something that you do once and let it go. And it's also important to kind of have on-ramps in different types of, different in the life cycle of the information life cycle. If you think about, if you have a project that's going to fundamentally change the way you capture data, or if you have a new business product, or any kind of change in your organization, I think you end up needing to re-look at that risk literally as a change impact assessment. So your privacy impact assessment must be built into your change impact assessment to maintain the stuff that you've done, right? Because you're going to do all of this. And it's not like you're in a static environment. Things change a lot over time. So you want to almost build in that self-cleaning engine as you go along, and think about maintenance as well. Yeah.
And one of the things we do from a data governance point of view is that one of the best ways to get this entrenched within the organization is to get into the SDLC or the development cycle, be it agile, be it whatever it is, so that you can start applying the by design, the review gates, the things like that. That it's always hard to deal with this thing post-event. It's a lot easier to deal with them as they're happening and to be part of the project. But trying to deal with it at the end is not easy.
It also impacts on your IT service delivery, your service management. So your change management for, your normal sort of IT service management changes. And I would also want to put it in at your business development as well, not just software. So, when they're actually making design decisions about the new products, or if they're going to launch into a new territory, or if they're going to outsource the IT help desk, that type of thing. You really want to have your privacy impact assessment done at that point as well.
Yep. But I must admit, Mark, when I tried to build a context around the ROPA and looked at my ability just to be able to, with the one customer I have, they have 6 business departments. I've got to get something out by, June, July timeframe. It's now feasible to start there. But if I attempted to go down the discovery route and the database analysis, similar to what Johan is suggesting, I could be there for a long time. And a lot of the times the people are using Excel as a database, and that's a whole new. Now I've just got to buy more and more tech to get this job done.
Yeah, or Access, even worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because then it's really hidden inside there what's going on.
Yeah.
The good thing with this kind of a chart, slide, glossy handout is to show the depth and breadth of what's required.
Yes.
And then be able to zoom in as you've done here. Okay, we're going to start with 1, then we're going to do 2, and we're going to stop at 4. But these are other things that you need to consider.
Correct.
A big company's already going to have a whistleblower, right? So that becomes a checkbox exercise.
Yeah.
A
lot of them have got it, but it tends to be around corruption and that type of stuff. We now need to say, how does it apply to privacy? And what I'm also finding is, in some cases, people respond badly to whistleblower because they think it's now a legal thing, or where it's actually just voicing your concern over the use of data and the possibility of making use of people's data that can cause damage or harm or whatever that may be. So, okay, are there any other questions?
If I could end on a positive note. Because I know this kind of thing can be very overwhelming, and I know a lot of people say to me, but Caroline, how are we going to get the business to, this is a grudge purchase? How do we sell this amount of work? And one of the things I can point you to is that Capgemini did a research, a paper on what happened with, just sharing it with you, on what happened with GDPR. So they did a comparison of, they did a whole bunch of interviews with CIOs and heads of organizations before GDPR went live, and then a year after GDPR had gone live. And what was interesting, I'll just share the summary of these stats here in the chat menu, because I found it quite fascinating. So they actually compared the attitude shift and the findings of these guys. And one of the things that they found was that there were unexpected benefits that came out of it. So it wasn't just about a grudge purchase of, okay, we're going to be compliant, okay, we're going to avoid fines. What it also did was, so I'll just read some of them here. They gained a competitive advantage. So 28% had thought they might get a competitive advantage prior to GDPR going live. 92% of them found that they had actually created or found some sort of advantage. And this was purely through GDPR compliance. They found the customer trust. 84% of them found that their customer trust had increased. Wow. Their brand image increased. 81% of them had found their brand image had improved. And also employee morale, which was super interesting. 79% of them found that their employee morale had gone up. So sort of really interesting spin-offs. And I suspect part of it is that it unmasks and uncovers the complexity that we deal with on a day-to-day basis that never really makes it into management reports, or, we just kind of cope with having to reformat that Word document or regenerate that Excel spreadsheet or go find that email, or, we just cope with those pain points on a day-by-day basis. And what I found privacy does is creates other benefits, spin-off benefits. And I think it's important to start looking at that as well, because risk management isn't just about mitigating negative risk. It's also about leveraging opportunities. So I think it's important to also start tracking, what could we gain from this? What are the positive outcomes we could gain from this as well? Yeah. So just to give us a happy note. Johan has got his hand up, I think.
Yes.
Actually, yes. Actually, Caroline. Well, actually, just on that note, so actually, what you've explained now. So actually, does it mean that employee morale goes up because everybody in the enterprise or company or whatever actually starts to realize how important privacy is, and if they do their little bit, or everybody feels like they're doing their little bit, actually, be it the lowest worker that deals with privacy right down, or actually right up to the CEO, something like that. So everybody, actually, doesn't matter actually how little you do, actually, if everybody has the trust, then that brings up the confidence. Actually, is that actually what they actually really found?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the findings were behind that, but
Okay.
certainly some of the things that I've seen are, I think efficiency. I think just in general, realizing, having more focus on why data is working, why data flows are working or not working. But I think also there's I imagine IT morale will go up because it's finally an opportunity to have the senior management teams start understanding some of the complexities that an IT team generally, or data management team generally, cope with. I think that complexity gets hidden a lot of the time.
One of the really nice side effects that we had was, and we did this whole data catalog and stuff like that, and we presented it to a lot of the business users, and a few of them just said, I wish I had seen this many years ago, because I had no idea that we've been collecting this data in these other departments that I really need, and I've been battling to get. Now, that almost lack of transparency, data quality refers to the accessibility. That is big within companies, and especially the big ones.
Yeah, for sure. Accessibility, getting hold of data that's reliable when you need it. It just relieves so much stress.
So if you can move from, and I remember even responding to an RFP on data privacy, where the guys who put it out said, we don't just want to do this for data privacy, we want to help the people make use of the data, understand the data they have, and make use of this in things like machine learning and other elements. So the focus is not just about ticking the box on the data privacy element.
But it feeds in very nicely into exercises like customer journey mapping, for example, or voice of the customer. In any of those types of initiatives, could use this information, and honestly, master data. Once you can get a clear perspective of who you know about and what information you know about those people, and have that reliable, I think that does become a huge benefit. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you, that there are benefits. Look for them; they're probably out there. And
sorry, just to also a little comment on that, what you just said now, because that's what I also wanted to actually know from you, Caroline, is that would this then lead to a real good focus on master data management and actually getting that golden record, because everybody is beginning to see how important it is, because if you get a grip on your master data, then you are already also sort of addressing a lot of these privacy problems. Is that true?
Well, definitely from an identity point of view. So, understanding who your customer is, right? So knowing, or even just the master party index or master person index. If you just think about the one requirement of POPI is that if somebody objects to being contacted by electronic means, unsolicited communications, if you have more than one communication function in your organization, and they all have their own Salesforce distribution list that they run, or marketing's got a emailing program that does something, and someone else has a third party who sends out event invitations, and if they're doing unsolicited direct marketing, if somebody says they don't want to be contacted in that way, that needs to be applied consistently across your whole organization. Everybody needs to know that person has objected. So you imagine the cost and the effort and the expense of trying to shut that down, shut down that direct marketing for that person, or whatever processing. People are now allowed, you're allowed to object to processing of your data. So if one person comes in and says, I don't want you to process my data in this way anymore, I don't want you to send me direct marketing anymore. If you don't have a master party index where you can identify that person accurately across all your data stores, imagine the cost, what it's going to cost you to figure it out, to go and dig in every single time somebody raises one request like this. So I think just the efficiency alone and the cost benefit.
And that was also really when we needed to report on incident reporting. I remember doing the data warehouse design for the incident reporting, and part of that was how many customers were affected, what types of customers. That's all part of a good master data system. Will have a lot of that information for you.
Okay, thanks very much.
Excellent, guys. Thank you very much. I don't see any more questions. Okay. Thank you. Thanks everyone for attending. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Howard.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Very much.